Our breakfast in November was titled Innovation Acceleration, and at that event, we aimed to talk at a macro level about how, as a state and a region, we could accelerate innovation in our community. Today, though, we're going to go a little bit right to the source, to the micro level, to focus less on those big structures and systems, and instead focus more on the individual entrepreneurs that have started, grown, maintained, and built their successful businesses. Our goal today, to learn from their triumphs and their failures in order to better, and we had a pre-event meeting, they talked a lot about their failures, so that'll be a nice conversation. They all said they're going to be nice and open about the things they failed at, and said there was too much to talk about today. So make sure when you're asking questions later, you ask a lot about those. Those are our best opportunities to learn. We've got a great, diverse group of business owners to learn from today. Businesses, of course, at many different stages, and while we might have an image in our mind of the high-growth startup like a Facebook or Snapchat, or you can go down the line, the reality is entrepreneurialism can be found in many forms. While each panelist possesses the entrepreneurial spirit, each brings a slightly different perspective to the table. Directly to my right is Tiffany Johnson. She's the co-founder and producing artistic director at Pyramid Theater Company, which was founded in 2015 to help illuminate the presence of Black artists in theater and provide a means of artistic expression to emerging Black voices. Nancy Mwirotsi is the founder and executive director of Pursuit of Innovation. She's from Kenya originally and began her nonprofit to empower refugees and underserved youth through teaching technology skills. Dr. Chris Nelson is president and CEO of Kemin Industries. He didn't found his business, but as its second-generation leader, he's taken an established business, instilled the entrepreneurial spirit, and grown the company into a business with more than 2,000 employees and locations in 90 countries. And of course, Connie Wimer. She's the chairman of Business Publications Corporation. Without her here, of course, we wouldn't be here today. Not only did she start the business record, but she started the... I missed somebody, so... Sorry, Casey. And Casey, who has founded a company, I went right down my line, and that's why you shouldn't follow a script, you know. Casey Niemann is the founder of AgriSync, a growing startup that he began after deciding to leave the relative safety of Microsoft in the corporate world. And of course, Connie Wimer, the founder of Business Record, who also started DSM magazine, a host of other products, and some community events as well that she founded, but then also let go as well. So that'll be something we can ask her about too today. Again, this is a Q&A with you in the audience. I'm going to ask a few questions to get things going this morning, but definitely want to have your questions. The best way to make sure you get your question asked today is to be the very first person, to be the brave soul to raise your hand. So I'll be on the lookout for the first hand up. So our first question today, and Tiffany, we'll start with you. Tell us a bit about the business you built and the story of why you built the business.
So back in 2010, I started getting back into acting again. It was something that I had done when I was a young girl and all through high school. And I had become a young mother, so I kind of stepped out of the realm of acting and kind of taking on the role of working and providing. My kids got a little older, and so I started getting back on the stage and having opportunities to act again. One of the things that I immediately identified was that I was able to be a part of stories that were being told, but my story was never being told. So I was standing on the stage oftentimes, and I was an accessory to what was the story as opposed to having the platform to tell the story from our perspective. We had some like-minded individuals that felt the same way in the theater sector, and we decided that we were going to take an opportunity to start trying to show Black work and from the Black perspective. We did a co-production with the Des Moines Social Club, and we did a play called Fences by August Wilson, of which I was in that play. It was a life-changing experience for all of us that were on the stage. All of a sudden, our story was being told from our own platform, and people were being able to see and hear about our culture from us. We tried it again that next year in 2014 and decided to do a soldier's play. That play was again a remarkable opportunity to see how Black work and Black stories really fit and were a part of the American story. After that, 7 of us that were just stubborn and wanted to see art being done from that platform all the time decided that we would get together and create what is now Pyramid Theater Company, which was founded in August 2015.
Nancy.
I had no intentions of starting anything, by the way. I am a tech dropout. I went to school for tech. I dropped out, and here I am getting young people excited about technology. That was not my path. That changed for me after meeting a single mother with 2 kids who was a refugee from Burundi. And she was sick. She'd been put at a hospital in Pleasant Hill. She lived in Des Moines. And when I went to help her interpret, because I speak Swahili, I found out that she was just there with the kids, no jackets. It was one very cold morning. I told myself, there's no way I'm gonna let her go home without jackets. I was very broke, went to Walmart, which sometimes I don't go to Walmart. And when I was there, I could only afford 2 fleece jackets. And I tell this story often, by the way, so if you've had it, bear with me. And on my way, she said, I need food. And I was like, oh, okay. So I help her get food. It never occurred to me that there are people who come here, don't have transportation to buy food. So I took her, got the food, took her home, and a couple months later, I was trying to get her a job. She got a job. One thing I forgot, I helped her get a job, but I forgot the children. So in forgetting the children, one day I realized that her daughter was giving her a very hard time. And I realized that boys who came as refugees had opportunities like soccer, but girls had nothing. At that point, we were having a very big crisis. A lot of people don't even realize. When you're coming in as an immigrant, sometimes, especially where we come from, an education for a girl is there. For some people, it just doesn't happen. Girls are expected to be married young. And I was seeing all these young girls getting married. I started a dance class. 5 years later from the dance class, and transitioned it to a tech class. And that's how we started. And let me tell you, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm learning every single day. For me, I have amazing friends who stood by me, and I remember one time meeting Casey, and I think I was complaining the whole entire time, and I'm going like, I don't know what I'm doing. So for me, it just happened, and let me tell you guys, I don't regret it. It's been 4 years. It's been amazing. We've seen great kids go to college, first generation, and I'm proud of what we do.
And Chris?
Well, my story is a little different. I'm the 2nd generation in Kemin Industries, and when I was in graduate school, getting my PhD, there was no intention to come back to the family business. I was going to be a college professor, get grants, and so on. And after spending the time in graduate school and really seeing sort of what that career was about, and then seeing an opportunity to come back to the family business, I did. And we have been extremely fortunate over the years to have grown substantially from where my father founded the business. And now, as noted, we have factories in 9 different countries, offices in 90 different countries, and really span the globe with a series of products that are focused on nutrition, both for animals and for humans. Part of our growth has really come from starting new businesses inside our business. And we have done this 9 different times, failed spectacularly with 3 of them, and but been very fortunate with some of the others. And one of our most recent now is to be able to bring medical cannabis to the state. We are the owners of MedFarm, which is the first legalized medical cannabis in the state of Iowa.
Casey, since I'm not going to forget you this time.
Good morning, Casey Niemann with AgriSync. My story started again in a similar approach where I was at Microsoft, had been at Microsoft for a number of years, but I'd grown up on a farm in Kansas, and I was having a conversation with my dad and uncles about all the technology that was coming into agriculture a few years ago. Most of it that you hear about is related to data, drones, telematics. But the frustration at the farmer level was really with the fact that they needed the human element. They needed people to help them adopt all of this technology. All of us had a great breakfast this morning, and in fact, none of you were concerned that we were going to run out of food, right? None of you are thinking right now about whether or not you'll have lunch, and we have the American farmer to thank for that. Part of their productivity, though, is being able to adopt all of this technology. And so, while most of the ag tech has been focused on data, drones, telematics, precision ag, we elected to focus on the human element. So I left the comforts of Microsoft to go to my basement and start AgriSync several years ago. And now we are the leading customer service platform that connects the human experts in agriculture with farmers for about 225 businesses in the US, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom.
Connie?
Probably very few in the room are old enough to remember a little publication called the Des Moines Daily Record. It was the official legal paper for Polk County, and I purchased it to gain access to the information more quickly for Iowa Title Company, which I owned at the time, and I had computerized the title company, and my plan was to speed up the service by getting the information more quickly. And a year and a half after I had purchased it on a 20-year contract, the judges decided that they didn't need a legal paper any longer and gave me 5 days notice. Scary, scary time in my life. I have chaired the Chamber's first Small Business Committee and have tried to convince the Register to write more about small businesses. So I decided we would change from a legal paper to a business paper. I knew nothing about publishing business and made every mistake in the book. I'll talk about that later.
You talked, in all those situations, there had to be a moment to actually make that leap. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the mindset as you were kind of peering over the deep end, deciding to go ahead and go for it, and talk about what it was that ultimately helped push you over that edge to have the confidence to overcome that fear. You want to take the first shot?
I'll take the first shot at that. Maybe I can talk a little bit about the decision to go ahead and try to get a license to make medical cannabis. We understood real clearly that to be able to do this would take an investment of somewhere to $5 to $10 million here in Des Moines to be able to set that up. And I think the thing that really sort of put myself over the edge to make the decision was really a discussion I had with Steve Gear and his family in West Des Moines, mayor of West Des Moines, as many of you know. And they have a child that has suffered for years with epileptic fits. And to be able to understand what the power of the cannabis plant could do to really change their lives was right in line with Kemin's mission, and thus it was really worthwhile, I felt, to be able to go ahead and take a try and see how it worked out.
I can answer that very easily. It was the 18 and a half years of payments on the 20-year contract.
So one forced, one fell into it.
I'll add, I guess. I was actually, I'd had this kind of concept in my mind for a while, that I was actually traveling home from a incentive trip that I had been on with Microsoft, one of those nice sales trips that maybe many of you have been on before. And my wife and I were on this flight home, and we'd been, praying about a decision and a change, and it was at that moment that, she kind of believed in me to say, hey, I think you can do this. And, I think we made the leap at that point to kind of choose courage over comfort. And I think for a lot of people, there's always that kind of entrepreneurial whisper, if you will, in the back of their mind that says, oh, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to, start this. But until they have maybe the encouragement or the belief of someone else in them to do that, it makes a huge difference. And so I always encourage people when they're thinking about taking that leap of faith and making that big decision to really ask, do you have the people around you to believe in you, to support you, maybe during the times when it's a little more challenging. And so, I was obviously blessed to have my wife and best friend say, yes, I think you can do this. But taking that leap of faith also means that, oftentimes your dream is someone else's sacrifice, right? The people around you may have to, in my wife's case, she went back to work so that I could pursue this. You know, we have 3 kids, a mortgage, and all the other things that come along with, you know, I guess being our age in life. And having someone that's supportive of that and that believes in you, for me, that was a critical decision point. And we still think back to that a lot. And on the good days and also on the challenging days, you want to ask, you know, what's your supporting cast like?
I can say, for me, I was really tired of just seeing kids who are very smart not being given an opportunity for success. And it got to me, it still gets to me, because some of those kids were going and working at meat plants with their parents, yet they're straight A students. So I was just very upset with that and seeing a lot of hopelessness. And I just wanted to do something.
And I would just add to that that we identified that the arts was something that was being taken out of a lot of educational opportunities for people. And we realized that it was a very essential part of understanding the humanity of the world and the human connection between people. And we decided that having a theater company here that was focused on pushing culture into a community that didn't have a lot of it, as you could see by the makeup of the room right now that we're in, there's not a lot reflected with our culture. And we wanted to be a part of showing people the cultural contribution and how that can really make things beautiful in the place that you live. So I would say just providing that artistic outlet for people from young ages to older adults was something that really pushed us to kind of just take the jump and say that we need to do this.
Each of you talked about filling a need of some sort and having the vision to be able to see that. And I wonder how, when you were deciding whether or not to move forward, how you tried to validate whether, obviously you were seeing something that other people maybe hadn't seen or had seen and didn't have the courage to take on. How did you try to justify deciding to move forward with the business and knowing that you were going to be taking a bit of a risk?
Well, you know, I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do when you try to decide to jump into something brand new, is really validate if the intuition that you've had or the gut feel that, okay, this is going to work. If you don't do the proper homework, that's when you get in trouble. And I would say, especially in the 3 failures that we've had at Kemin of new businesses we've started, I can almost lean back and say that was one of the mistakes that we made, was always in not really doing very thorough homework. I would say we always did some cursory homework, but never really drilled down to say, is this the need that we see, is it real, and is it large enough to justify the type of sacrifice it's going to take, whether it be monetarily, intellectually, or with people.
What do you think led to the times where maybe you didn't do enough of the research? What do you think would have led to that?
You know, we've been very fortunate. It was always one of our things for starting a new business within Kemin is that we have to have a passionate person that's very passionate about a particular need that they see. And I have to say that it usually starts with myself. I'm usually easily sold on those needs. And and I would look back on the 3 that we failed on is that the data that was presented was okay, but I didn't probably look skeptically enough at it.
Yeah, I think passion is important, and I can attest from, I remember when I first met Nancy, she was deeply passionate about what she was doing. And you need passion to kind of endure the highs and lows of any new business or startups, and that perseverance is important. I also think just getting feedback and being open with your idea. I know at the beginning I was a little hesitant to go to other people and kind of talk them through what I was thinking about, because I was a little concerned about would they, steal my idea or think that it's silly. Or my encouragement to entrepreneurs is to be relatively open with your idea and get lots and lots of feedback, and especially from would-be customers. Will people pay for what you're doing? That's kind of a critical thing. I think we live in a community that is so nice and so pleasant, and we all want to root for each other. And so there's this sort of, well, that's a fine idea, Casey. But they're not the one who is going to have to, dip into their savings or, all the things. And so you need to really ask about the sacrifice that you're going to make and get some of those people that will give you the tough love. I still remember a good friend of mine, Dan Freeberg, sat me down at McDonald's in West Des Moines and said, Casey, of these 3 ideas, 2 of them are awful. They will not work. And it was that brutal honesty that I appreciated. And so trying to get a group of trusted advisors, mentors around you that will tell you the tough parts about starting a business. I look at Mike Caldwell in the back of the room. Mike, wave your hand. If you're thinking about doing a startup, you need to have coffee with this guy. One of the things he's going to tell you is it will cost twice as much, it will take twice as long, and there is no sort of guaranteed next step after it, right? And you need to have your feet on the ground. Now, he'll also probably open the door to a lot of resources that the Des Moines Partnership has that will help you and guide you, but I can't stress enough to get kind of that honest feedback. And sometimes doing that from people who are willing to tell you the good and the bad. And take your time with that. I think as Chris said, a lot of times if we don't do our market research, that's when we get into things that maybe don't have a really clear and defined value proposition.
I give a lot of credit to what was then the Chamber of Commerce, is now the partnership, when they asked me to chair that first small business committee. And again, probably many of you aren't aware that 35 years ago, the United States thought that big business was the most important thing, and they sort of ignored small business. There were a couple of White House conferences on small business that I attended, and I developed a passion for promoting small business, and so I give a lot of credit to the Chamber for that. As we continue to grow, we now have probably more than 35 different publications, digital and print, and many of those are fueled by passion. I got involved with Johnny Danos on a mental health project a number of years ago, and a couple of years ago we published something called Lifting the Veil to try to get people to talk about mental health and to reduce the stigma. So our company is also very much driven by passions.
All right, so it's that time. I'm going to open up for. I already got a question in the back. That's great. I didn't even have to. Thanks, Matt.
So a lot of times we talk about what we wish we'd known when we started, and then there are those things that we're glad we didn't know when we started because we might not have done it all. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What are you glad you didn't know when you set out on your journey?
All right, so the question so everybody can hear is, what are you glad you didn't know when you started out on your journey?
And I was going to lose money for at least 3 years.
I would have to say I'm glad I didn't know how much work was involved on the back end, because that would have scared me away right away. Sometimes I wonder how I sleep anymore because I don't get very many hours of sleep these days. But passion, going back to what they said, the passion in the work is what keeps you going and driven, and the understanding that sometimes you have to stand in the light and sometimes you have to be the light, and that the work involved, the outcomes of that work are the fruit of that labor, and it makes it all worth it in the end. So if I had to say anything was the big surprise for me, it was the amount of work that was involved in doing something that was art. We believe art is beautiful when you see a stage production and you go out there and you see the play and it's beautiful and it's nice. I think a lot of people don't know what goes on behind the scenes to create that art and to make it beautiful. And sometimes it's grueling, and sometimes it hurts a little bit, and sometimes it's tiring. But it all, at the end of the day, is worth it when it achieves what you set out to do, when it makes the difference and the impact in the community that you wish to make. It makes it worth it. But it is a lot of work.
So for me, I'm actually surprised at how resilient I have become. I think when we first started out, I had this assumption like, wow, we're doing great stuff, everybody's gonna love it and just join us, right? I would write proposals, which were really bad because I didn't know how to write proposals, and they would get rejected. I remember one day I got like 40 rejections, and I hated everybody who rejected me. Truthfully, I knew nothing about proposals, right? So also making the wrong assumptions for me. I'm like, nowadays, hey, bring it on. I appreciate the challenge, so.
I think for myself, almost with every one of our enterprises that we started, I'm glad I didn't know how long it would take customers to make a decision about a new product. Because I always presumed when, and maybe that's too much of a scientist in myself, is well, here's the data, so yeah, you're going to buy it now. That's not the way it works at all.
I would say if I would have known that the macroeconomics of agriculture, specifically $3 corn instead of $5 or $6 corn, was going to stay as long as it is. Obviously, we've got challenges now with trade and a number of other things. Had I known that, it probably would have scared me off of starting an ag tech company. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of great businesses that start out of the ashes of a poor macroeconomic economy. And so my encouragement is if you can grow a business when the headwinds are coming against you from a macro perspective, I guess I'm really looking forward to when we do have $6 corn. But I would just say those are things you can't control. You know, in every business, you need to kind of have that list of things that you can stay up at night and worry about it. But at the end of the day, you can't control it. So what are the, you know, I have a list of 2 or 3 things that I know and that I can control, and then a list of about 100 things that I have no idea about and I can't control. And you've got to get to the point where you can let go of some of those macro concerns that, again, are maybe out of your hands or you just haven't had time to figure out.
I listened to a podcast, a Freakonomics podcast, and it was talking about the optimism bias and how a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders oftentimes the things they don't know are the reasons why you would try to shoot for the moon in that effort. So I've always come back to that because they've talked about the balance of why projects always end up being taking way longer to happen and over budget, and most of the things wouldn't have happened if somebody knew what it was actually gonna take to get there. So more questions from the audience. Yeah, right up front.
Throughout your path of success, you've had a lot of challenges, a lot of objections you faced. So what were some of the memorable ones and how did you overcome that?
So the question for everybody is what were some of the challenges that they had to overcome, and to tell me the story of what that looks like.
You know, I look back on a couple of the, again, enterprises we started. Sometimes we were very fortunate and were able to acquire a very large customer very early, and then it sort of got the enterprise off the ground. And I can remember one particular instance where we had obtained a very large customer and then lost them within about 9 months after we started selling a particular product to them. Overcoming that is really key because it decimates your income statement very quickly and put us in that case back into a loss position, which we had been actually in a positive position. There you have to really rely basically on the faith of the idea. If you truly believe that the idea is solid and that the marketplace is ready for that idea, then you have to persevere. And you know, there's a lot about enthusiasm. There's a lot about being positive. But my feeling is that persistence at the end is probably the greatest emotional attribute you need as an entrepreneur.
I think for me, funding is a challenge, especially being a woman founder, and I'm in tech. And I started a nonprofit. Sometimes I ask myself, why did I do that? It's very different. I don't know a lot of people, so every day I'm still trying to build relationships with new people. I didn't go to high school here, so I don't know anybody who went to like East, so we're not, you know. It's just me trying to make very relationships. And what has really amazed me is, I'll tell you guys, I have an amazing group of women who know nothing about technology, but they hang out with me. They support me completely. They're all from Iowa, and I just met them about just after I started the organization, and they've been there with me. And then I've met some amazing people in the Des Moines startup. There's a guy called Ben. When I first started, we were so broke. A story was written about what we were doing, and I get this one email from a guy called Ben. He's the CEO and founder of Dweller, and he says, "I'm here to help you." And he's been standing right there with me. So I'm very appreciative of I call them my startup brothers. Without them, I don't think I would have been able to be here today. So.
Connie, you often tell a story about being one of the, in terms of being a female business owner in Des Moines, and maybe take us back a little bit to the time when you were starting that business.
Well, banks wouldn't even talk to a woman about a loan, and so I would reiterate what you said, and it's still more difficult for women to get a loan at most banks. But I also want to emphasize what Chris said, that perseverance. You know, losing money for 3 years and having to find that money, not from bank loans or contributors, but to hang in there, because I believe so strongly that the community needed a business paper. So convincing the business community that this was an asset was probably my greatest challenge, and then learning the business from scratch.
Tiffany or Casey?
I would just say the people aspect of growing a business, and sometimes recognizing that those early hires are not going to be with you through the duration and when you tear the Band-Aid off. So I happened to hire early on a close friend of mine that I'd worked with at Microsoft as my first developer, and he was a great developer inside of a big corporation, but not in a startup. And I remember the day that I decided to kind of tear the Band-Aid off and make a change, and I did not have a plan B, right? And my only regret is I didn't make that decision sooner. It was a tough decision, but what's the book my wife, so They Eat the Frog in the First Thing in the Morning, is that the book? Have any of you heard about this?
What's the title?
What's the title of the book?
Eat the frog.
Eat the frog, right? Or eat that frog. So she's always, my wife Tammy, telling me about, you got to do the tough things right away, get them out of the way. And sometimes, especially with people, it's tough to have those hard conversations. And so I'm a big believer in, really looking at the people you have on the bus, if you will, and are those the right people for this stage of your company? And as your company changes and grows, you might outgrow some people, and other people might outgrow you, as a company. But I think the people aspect, especially when you're a small company and it's a little more fragile, that's a really important thing to kind of get right, and know that you've got to have people that, in our case, we try to look for people, and by the way, we're hiring right now, so I'll put that plug in. But do they align to our core values? Do they have this passion, right? This passion that Nancy and others have been talking about, that they want the job? And then third is, do they have this competency? If you can, hire crazy smart people. Life will be better for you as a small business owner. So are they competent? Do they have the capabilities? But really think about, the people that you have, and are they aligned to those kind of three core buckets for us matters.
Tiffany?
I would say that starting a Black theater company in a city that is primarily not Black and has 11 other theater companies in existence is probably pretty crazy, theoretically. And so that was difficult for us to kind of consume, like, why another theater company? What is the relevance of that? And that was kind of the pushback that we were getting across the board when it came to other theater companies. And it was really challenging to think about how we can make ourselves stick out. But we decided that we had a niche with telling our own stories, and that we needed to perform in that niche, and then we needed to properly refer out from there. There's something to be said about being able to tell your own story from your own platform and getting people to understand you on a level that is common. A lot of times we get so stuck in the black and white of things that we forget that we're humans that feel things on the same level a lot of times. So being willing to push past what we thought might be a barrier is how I felt like we overcame the challenge. And being unafraid to say that it's okay for us to want to have our own, and to want to tell our own stories, and to want to make the world realize how relevant and how fitting it is to the American story. I think the biggest challenge was just making sure, or deciding that we could create something else outside of something that already existed, and find the niche about it to perform well and to refer outside of that.
Type of, were you surprised either at the amount of pushback or the lack of pushback when you were trying to start the theater?
I was surprised by the amount of pushback, honestly, because at first people were kind of feeling like it was kind of beating a dead horse. Like, theater is an industry that is dying. As we get more and more into the world of technology, people get less and less into the aspect of human relationships and the relevance of human relationships. And so it's just, when funding is tight for something like that, you immediately get people wanting to put the squeeze on you, because they're like, wait a minute, now this is another competitive aspect that's gonna, be out here looking for that funding that's already so scarce. And so sometimes they want to talk you out of it and say, why not join a theater company that's already existing? Why do you have to create something new? And I think being able to show people that there is a relevance in being able to speak from your own platform and represent your own culture, that doesn't mean you have to streamline yourself with the majority culture, and that your story is still relevant, and that still belongs in the American story. So yeah, I was surprised by the amount of pushback, but also I was also astounded by the community support at the end of the day. It's been amazing.
Something somebody said earlier about I think Casey, you were talking about the brutal honesty component. I imagine there have been, each of you have probably faced people telling you no, that that's not a good idea. And so how did you try to validate whether the advice was good advice or not good advice?
I think figuring out their perspective, do they have an industry view on what you're doing? Do they have a level of expertise that you should really dig in and say, yeah, they're probably right? Or, I think for me, when I was in the early stages trying to explain what we were doing, if I was doing so with somebody in the agriculture industry, they instantly got it. And then if I went to somebody that was, maybe very disconnected from that, they were kind of just, well, I'm not quite sure that'll work. And so maybe dig in with people that are in the same vertical or in the same domain. If you're in real estate, if you're in legal, try to get perspectives from people who have been in that industry for a number of years. And then also always ask them, say, hey, do you have anybody else in your network that you think I should sit down with and get feedback? But I'm a big fan of just asking bluntly for feedback. And even if they say no, ask, get into the why of what that is, and really do a gut check on yourself and say, am I just not hearing that because I'm blinded by my own passion for this? That can be dangerous, by the way. That can be a dangerous way to pursue a business. The blind optimism, I think, Dr. Nelson does a good job of saying, dig into the data, right? As a scientist, there's value there. And so really understand and validate, but ask for the why, and what would you do differently if you were in our shoes?
The resistance is internal. I wanted to start Restaurant Week several years before we actually made it happen. The same with IA Magazine, because someone on the staff demanded that I have a reasonable business plan, and I was going with that instinct.
Now, So now I know that story. So, so I'll be careful with how I ask the next question. But talk about the value of, specifically with IA Magazine, I think that's fair to talk about a little bit. You had this idea for a magazine to go statewide, and Jeanette kind of tried to rein you in a little bit to try to understand, make sure that we had the plan in place. So talk a little bit about that balance back and forth.
Well, and that's the great value of surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you are and have a different outlook. Jeanette was much more conservative and required more of the research that Chris is talking about. But some of the entrepreneurial attitudes are just that, taking a risk and believing in what your gut is telling you. It's not always right, that's for sure.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, right up front.
You've all spoken about people and how important that is to businesses, and you have different sized businesses and life stages of your businesses. So specific to Des Moines as a city, how have you been able to recruit the talent? So Dr. Nelson, you run a global company. How have you recruited global talent to Des Moines? And each of you, how have you found the people in this community, or have you not, that can help you keep those businesses strong and growing? Curious about that.
So the question is about finding the right talent to bring into the organization, specifically looking at trying to bring in some global talent or maybe really highly skilled talent, and how you know that they're the right fit for your organization.
You know, I'd make two comments. When I look across our leadership teams throughout the company, it's a mixture of people that have grown up in the central Iowa area that were generally came into our company at a much lower level and grew dramatically. And we were able to recognize that growth, and they eventually came into a leadership talent. As a global company, in my core group, half of them are not Americans. So it's been very critical for me to have people with mother tongues that are different than English, and also that came from a very different culture. Recruiting those people to Des Moines has always been difficult. 3 of my leaders actually maintain apartments in Chicago that they probably go back to on the weekends. There's no doubt that you're bringing somebody, say, from Paris, France, and yes, it is Des Moines, but it's a long ways from Paris, France. So I think it is that flexibility to be able to say, this is Des Moines, and I understand that not all the things that culturally that you are used to are here. Let's see if we can come to some arrangement, especially with a leadership position.
Tiffany, I wonder if you could talk a little bit. You're have the opportunity when you're casting a play, so you're doing that very frequently. You're having to build a team quickly and for a very specific purpose, and you're done. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the lessons that you've learned from the startup mentality of doing that for a play.
Absolutely. One thing that I've discovered is that it's not always building something and asking people to come to it. It's getting involved and invested in the communities. Sometimes going out into communities and becoming a part of things that are already existing and supporting are the ways that you do the best recruiting that you could ever do. Lighting somebody else's candle oftentimes is the best way to be able to have the fuel to light your own. So in casting, directing a show, 90% of it is in the casting. You could be the best director in the world. You can have the most visionary ideas when it comes to what you want to see on the stage, but if you don't choose the right storytellers, it doesn't mean a thing at all. The biggest thing that I could say is, and the most success that we have had in casting is not creating a situation where we're always asking people to come to us, that we're actually going out into the communities and meeting with them, cross-culturally too, not just in the urban communities, but cross-culturally, making ourselves a part of the cultural landscape in this town, in this city, is what is going to give us the opportunity to do the best recruiting for this city. And being unafraid to go out into those communities and really kind of put yourself invest in the community will create the opportunity for you to meet those people and to become a part of those people and to understand how to extract from them and get what you need. So I would say that don't feel like you have to be so stagnant or to be so structured sometimes. Give yourself the opportunity to go out in the community and make yourself a part of something else, and that will in turn reciprocate and feed back into you.
More questions from the audience? Yeah.
I have a quick question, probably for the more seasoned ones, more on growth opportunities and regarding the people that you work with. How do you know what a good number is to hire for employees? Because we're a small business, we've done most of your grand openings, thank you for that. So I struggle with, we've grown 34% every year for 22 years, that's a great number, we have plenty of revenue, but I still feel like I'm always working myself to death. I go to work early, I work all day, I come home, I work, but I still have 2 kids, I like to do marathons and exercise, and it's never done. So how do you know, like, do you need 1 employee, do you need 5 employees, do you have 15 employees, what, is there a magic number, there's no crystal ball? How do you know you're making too much, not enough, what's the magic number?
Sounds like you've got a good power breakfast topic for us. But, Connie, maybe this would be a good one for you to try to take a crack at. Obviously, when you started the business,
And
much
then
smaller
there's
staff.
people not wasting time either, like, there's ups and downs, right?
Talk about how to scale.
Obviously, when I started the business and was losing money, salaries were very low, and it was very, very challenging, and that's typical for a startup. Now, one of the ways that we decide, we track very carefully the average revenue per employee each year, and tried to keep that consistent or growing.
So more commission-based?
The revenue per employee.
So
And
taking
when
the
we
total
look-
taking the total revenue of the company and dividing it by the size of the staff, it gives you a good opportunity to kind of see as a company how you're growing.
And of course, when you're doing something new and you have to hire additional people, you look at what revenue can be generated from that new employee.
Chris, in a large business, how have you guys tried to handle that?
We have some of the same metrics actually that Connie talked about. We actually monitor, because we monitor it on a global basis, we monitor revenue divided by salaries. Salaries, just because people in India are paid very differently than people in the United States. But I would say that what we look for is that, do you have enough people? I hate to say, look, when we start these businesses, they're always started with a very passionate person. We're always in a negative income statement to start with. And so what you start off with is that, in my mind, is everybody beyond employed. In other words, that in the startup, nobody in the startup ever goes home with their work completed. There's never a time when you're in Friday night and you got everything done on the to-do list. There's never a time when there aren't 3 or 4 priorities of things that you should be doing. And I think that's just evident in any startup, whether it's inside a large company or in a very small company. That's the type of thing that you actually have to love if you're going to be in an entrepreneurial atmosphere.
I would also just say, the sooner you can get people to think like owners, be it through options, equity, etc. Because obviously you've got a passion for your business because you own it, and you're going to work 24/7 to make it work. I think one of the challenges entrepreneurs have is if they're the only one that feels that way, they can get burnt out, and it's like a football game where there's 22 people on the field in need of rest and 100,000 people watching in need of needing something to do, right? So how do you spread the workload? And this is hard, because if you're really good at a part of the job, how do you hand that hat to someone else? And I'm wrestling with this myself, and I guess my therapist says talk about it in a large audience. My point is, it's not easy. It's not easy to do that, and also it's not easy to find people who have that same passion and drive. And so trying to get people on your team to kind of think like owners so that you can have a day where you're not doing work. And believe me, that's a struggle I wrestle with because I love what I do. But we've also, as you grow your business, you've got to be able to, hand those hats and responsibilities and really give them to them in completeness. And so I think that's a challenge for at least small startups. I see that a lot.
Well, one of the questions I definitely want to make sure we talked about today were those mistakes that we've made and that you've learned a lesson from. So I wonder if you could each share a story of maybe a mistake that you've made in the business and what you learned from it. If you want to take a first shot, just because you're to my right.
I would have to say a mistake that we made early on was being afraid to try and fail. Like, we talked ourselves out of it a little bit at first. Like, maybe this isn't something that we should do. Maybe this isn't something that we should bite off right now. Maybe this is going to be too much, too fast. But I think making mistakes is essential for the growth of anything. And being afraid to fail is probably the biggest mistake you'll ever make, because failure is only the opportunity to try something new. And the way that you look at mistakes is, I think, more so than not, the outcome that you get out of it. One of the biggest mistakes that I think we made as a company is not trusting ourselves from the beginning and feeling like we had to tiptoe into something that ended up being a very beautiful thing and that's growing very fast and having wonderful outcomes. So the biggest mistake that you can make is, I think, just not trying.
Nancy?
Just before I go to my mistakes, I want to say something about talent. I think in Iowa we really need to work hard together to actually groom the right talent. We're having a shortage of great talent and we're losing a lot of smart kids going to different states. So how do we work together with a company like Kemin to make sure those kids that are going to Iowa schools are actually staying back and benefiting the state? So that's what I do. We try to groom that talent and convince them to stay here. We do that by making sure companies come directly to teach with us. Because if kids cannot be what they don't see. So unless they see those companies, in fact, I'm taking like 130 kids to Hy-Vee Innovation Space, because I want them to know Hy-Vee. They eat there, but I want them to know that they can be employed there. So don't worry, Casey, maybe one of them will stick with you. Now, mistakes for me, I have amazing friends here who stood by me. Biggest mistake was learning to say no, right? My friend Jason would tell you, I am very good with kids. I can recruit like 100, 200 kids. They'll all come, they'll hang out. But sometimes doing that, you don't realize you're just having a headache and you're bringing in kids who sometimes just don't want to be there, they just want to hang out. So I remember one time we had a Youth Innovation Summit, we had 120 kids. I had to send home about 20 of those kids because they were just disrupting everything. So what I'm learning to do for me is to learn that I still love them anyways, but there are better ways to work with each different child and maybe look at where do you and how do you best help them.
Chris?
Some of the other panelists have already touched on it, but I think there's no question that the largest decision and thus the largest mistakes are always made by employee decisions of who you hire to work for you. We had a case with one of our businesses where we tried to start something off. We selected the wrong leader to lead it, and the business failed. And there was just no question that was the core reason. I always say that you can screw up a business plan, you can screw up a marketing situation, you can get the positioning statement wrong, but if you have the right people, all of that fixes itself. On the other hand, if you have all of those correct and you have the wrong person, absolutely the business will fail. And certainly for us, that has been, when I look back at the failures, oftentimes it's led to a very poor hiring decision.
In a large company where you're starting new businesses, how do you try to treat the idea of failure, knowing that you have an established business and there's maybe more at risk at that point?
We celebrate the failures, and we had one of them. We attempted to get into the personal care business with the various natural ingredients. Actually worked on it for 11 years, lost money every year. Finally closed it late last year. And the people, we kept every one of the people that was still there. We just redeployed them within the company. And the manager who was doing it, she's right now, she's on track for a very significant leadership position within the company.
So the importance of having that, knowing that they were going to be safe. But you used a phrase the other day when we were talking about knowing that you were burning the boats, I believe was.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's within a larger company. Do you actually land on shore and burn the boats so that there's no going back? And at least within our group, what we say is that we're going to come on shore. We're going to burn almost all the boats, keep one boat, and there will be a place for you. It certainly won't be in the same position that you were in when you went to this new area, but there will be a position of some sort. And in general, we've been able to keep that promise with each of the failures that we've had.
Yeah, I'd just add to Chris's comments. I often saw this when I was at Microsoft working with large corporations. The fear of failure inside of a large corporation kept them from trying new things. And it's really important if you're here and you're inside of one of those large established corporations that you encourage experimentation and failure. Because think about it, startups every day are living and dying on failure, right? They're saying, how fast can I fail and what can I learn from it? And big companies are saying, I don't want to fail because I'm afraid I'm going to be associated with, the Windows Phone, to give a good example from my prior life. Because I don't want to go down with the ship, right? And so my encouragement is, what are you doing to foster kind of that freedom to fail inside of your organization? And I would just say, as far as things that mistakes companies can make is focus. A lot of times we write down, here's what we're about, but do we take the time to write down, here's the 5 or 6 things that we're not about? To Nancy's point, what am I going to say no to? What parts of the business or what shiny objects am I not going to chase today, because I'm going to stay focused on kind of our core? And I definitely see this with technology startups that have a little bit of success, then they think they can wave that magic wand over 5 other business problems. And very few tech companies become kind of these Uber platforms, right, that do lots of things. Most of them are kind of really good one-trick ponies. And if they're focused on that, then they tend to do well. But I think in the early stages, at least for small companies like ourselves, that focus matters, and being willing to say no to potentially good ideas that just aren't in your core DNA it's really important.
Connie, a mistake?
Well, I think I'll make it unanimous that hiring the wrong person was the biggest mistake. I didn't have any idea how to hire the right people, and I frankly didn't have the resources. But I'll give you a fun example. In the early days when we were trying to figure out how do we make the content in the business record compelling so that people know they're going to learn something that will help their business. And so I'd have focus groups and did a survey at one point in time. And so I got the results back, and I was very excited to take it to the editor to share it. And he said, well, that's very interesting, but we're not going to pay any attention to it, are we?
What was the reason for that particular editor doing that? Not me. It wasn't me, I promise.
No, it was before you were born. This person had been at the register, and the idea of
And this one was, and I already made the comment. We started a particular group that sold supplements that went into dog and cat foods, or dogs and cats, and they were sold primarily through veterinarians. And so we did some research, and we felt that with a brand new veterinarian that we needed to call on, that it would take 3 visits. And after 3 visits, a good salesperson will persuade this veterinarian to be able to stock the product within their veterinary practice. What happened after we started the business, it turned out it took 9 visits. Now, when we started off hiring 12 salespeople to do this, and you only needed to do the calculation fairly quickly. When you can't get the sales after 3 visits and you need to do that much larger number of visits, there is no way that business plan is going to work. And so, again, if we had done a little more research and maybe actually gone out on a small beta trial in one city and tried to attempt this, I think maybe we could have turned it up before we went out on a large national scale.
Do you folks find trouble or challenge to do that test? In terms of, you got this idea and you're ready to go, and to be able to rein yourself in at that point.
I think that's always the emotional, maybe emotionally maturity. Yeah, he said Connie, as I think as you get a little older, and you've been burnt a couple of times, maybe it's let's gather a few more facts.
More questions from the audience. Yeah, back there.
So, I've been a business coach for 10 years and do some international coaching also. When I talk to a business owner about the development of products or expanding an area or even a new person, the hedgehog concept comes into play all the time. It's very effective. It's really the matrix of whether you should start or not start. And that amounts to, do you have a passion for it? Can you find a niche or be the best in the world at it? And where does the revenue stream well support it? So my question to them is, what was the struggle like to find that niche, the best in the world, that kind of position of the hedgehog concept for your business? When did that become real to you and you made the decision to pursue it?
So the question is referring to Jim Collins' Good and Great and the hedgehog concept, so the idea of trying to be really good at one specific thing. And when did you guys figure out the time when you kind of honed in on what that would look like for your businesses?
Well, I think the world changes so quickly now. Every year when we go off-site to do strategic planning for the next year, one of the first things we look at is what publications do we have that are less relevant and therefore less profitable, and how do we need to look at new things as the world changes. So we evolve constantly, trying to reflect the needs in the community.
Yeah, I think any entrepreneur probably has a healthy paranoia about what they haven't discovered or what they don't know relative to competitive analysis. And so I know that we often, kind of monitor the landscape that we're in, and again, for us, focusing on a specific vertical has been helpful. But being the first to listen to your customer is often the way to stay ahead of the curve. Because I think if you're, I always tell our customers we're not perfect, but we're good listeners and we're quick study. If you coach us down this path, we're not going to think about it for 6 months and then maybe take action. We try to take action pretty quickly. So my encouragement would be the way to kind of lean into the hedgehog principle is if you're the first one to really listen and define that problem for a niche and know that, again, and validate that customer is willing to pay for it, that's an important advantage. Sometimes we see really good technology that doesn't have a customer request behind it. I know at Amazon they have an approach where before you can start developing a new product, you've actually got to write the press release. And that press release has to include a customer. So you can't just dream up something and say, well, I think we're going to go build this. And obviously, if you have the resources of Amazon, you could. But they actually have to start with a customer request. Start with a customer that's saying, this is a specific need that I'm willing to pay for.
I build exactly on what Casey said. For what we're good at, it's really, we ask our customers, why are you buying from us rather than the 3 or 5 or 20 competitors that are there? What is it about our products that make that? And our customers have told us what we're good at, and and that's been a key to be able to then double down and focus in that area.
So, I'm just gonna say I agree with what they say because I don't know what that is, but.
Sounds like you got a good book to read. It'll help you say no. I think it's we're getting close to the end of our time here today, and one of the questions that I think would be great to hear from, we've talked a lot about risk today and risk taking, and so if you were to put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 of how much of a risk taker you are, what would you put it at, and then why would you say that?
Start with Connie.
Well, we did in our little conference call go over this, and I said I would put myself at 10. I kind of love risk. There's some kind of a satisfaction to it, and when it turns out well, there's huge satisfaction. So I'm a 10.
I would say I'm more of a 7 or 8, but my wife would probably say I'm an 11. It's a good balance somewhere in between there.
And I would put myself at a 9, just because 10 years ago I would have put myself at a 10. Maybe I'm a little older now.
I'd put myself as a 10. I dropped everything to be able to do this for the kids, and I'm a single mother who just right about that time had received a child support check of 33 cents. So that tells you a whole lot about taking risks and sticking with it just because you like what you're doing. So.
I would definitely say a 10. It's a tough market to try to create a company that's specific to culture and in an area that you are marginalized in, and you're literally the minority. And so it's a risk to get people to buy into that. But fear is in conflict of faith. So if you ever create something and you really believe in it, you have to have faith in it. You have to have faith that you're doing the right things and that you're making the right choices at the right times. And everybody is not going to have the answer for you. Sometimes the answer is within you. You know, feelings are not facts. So don't get caught up in your feelings because they're not factual. You know, really hone in on believing in yourself, believing in your brand, believing in your business, and not being willing to give up. But it was a real big risk to do something like this in the city. But I'm certainly glad that we did.
Chris, I would like to add that Jeanette Larkin put herself at a 5. Jeanette has recently retired, and Susanna is now in her place. So it'll be interesting to see where Susanna falls.
Well, we're just about out of time. Before yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
just want to
absolutely.
follow up on that question
Yeah.
because I think once you launch a business and you it changes you a little bit, right? So if you'd have been asked that question before you took your big leap, what would you assess your risk level at?
You know, I think in general, women tend to be less risk takers than males. I don't have any research or facts for that. That's my observation. And I'm kind of the opposite of Chris. He says he has become more conservative as he gets older. I've become more of a risk taker and trust myself a little bit more.
Yeah, I think over time you probably are willing to take on more risk because you've got some track record or you can look in the rearview mirror and say, I'm not scared anymore, right? It takes a lot more to make you blink after you maybe started that first business or made it through the first year or the second year. And so I think over time, if you think about how really good business people evolve, a lot of that does come with experience and the fact that they know in their gut that they can persevere or they can make it through challenging times. Because I think for a lot of us, again, that whisper in the back of our head is, I'd like to do this, but I'm not sure. And so once you've made some of those initial, think about if you were trying to climb a mountain the first time, you're like, I wonder if I could do this. Once you've done it, you probably have the confidence and say, I want to climb one just a little higher next time. So.
I would say I started out at a 5, honestly, because I was an artist. I am an artist. And so all I was thinking about was the work. Like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to have beautiful plays every year, and it's going to be wonderful. We're going to act. We all love acting. I had to really become a business person. And that was different for me than acting was, or being on the stage was. And then realizing the responsibility that comes along with it to the culture, to educate people, to get people to understand who and what you are, to give young people permission to dream and to, go out and dare themselves to try something like we were trying. It all of a sudden, it became so much more than just a play. It became becoming a part of the place that you live. Not only, representing culture from showing it on stage, but becoming a part of the cultural landscape. Not only saying that culture was pretty, but walking outside of your door and seeing it and feeling it as a part of where you lived, really feeling included, instead of just an accessory to what was already going on. I underestimated it by a long shot, and really had to become a business person overnight because I started just to be an artist. So yeah, I was a 5 to start, but I'm 10 and tipping the scales now.
We're just about out of time, so I want to give the panelists each a chance to give a closing thought, and the question I'd ask you to answer is give one final piece of wisdom for everybody in the crowd. Before we do that, just a couple things to let everybody know about. We've been videoing the event today, and we'll have photos, and our staff is going to be taking the content from today and putting that into a variety of our different products. If you don't already get our daily e-newsletters, we'd love to have you sign up. It's free. You get it twice a day. It's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on in the business community. You can sign up at businessrecord.com/sign-up. In addition, Innovation Iowa is a relatively new product that we have. It's an e-newsletter that comes out weekly on Thursday. Kate Hayden's putting that together. It's a great way to stay up to date with all the innovation that's going on in the state and the community. It'd be another fantastic way to plug in. You can go to innovationia.com, check that out. In addition, Innovation Iowa Magazine, we're currently working on that right now, and the staff is looking for story ideas. So if you've got know of a really good business, a business or a really great entrepreneur that you think we should be writing about and telling their story, we'd love to hear about that as well. So feel free to reach out to the newsroom. Our best story ideas always come from our staff, or from the audience, and from our readers. Lastly, we have a few events coming up just to save the date for. One brand new event that we're doing is called The Newsroom, similar in style where we have a panel discussion, but we're hosting them at up at the Business Record. It's for members only, and so it's a small, intimate group, and you get an opportunity to ask more questions and be a part of the conversation. We then take that conversation and turn it into stories in the Business Record. So the next one of that is going to actually be on entrepreneurship again, and it's going to be in April. Our next commercial real estate forum is going to be on April 25th, and our next Power Breakfast will be in May. So keep on the lookout for all those events coming at you. All right, final question. Let's go ahead and wind things down. So Tiffany, I'll give you the first shot to talk about one last final piece of wisdom.
Final piece of wisdom that I have is don't be afraid to, instead of burning your candle at both ends, don't be afraid to light someone else's candle to make it easier to illuminate the space without burning yourself out. And also, be afraid to not try. Be afraid of that. Be unafraid to try and fail, but be afraid to not try at all. Because there is no growth at all in your inability or in your inability to try. And that would be what I would leave you with today.
Nancy?
So for me, I always say believe in your own ability to bring about change. One thing for me is learning that failure and rejections, those are lessons. So once you learn how to look at those differently, you actually get the courage to do much more. And lastly, I'm just honored to be here because I stand here with stories of so many people. If I can stand here as somebody who has an accent and talk to you, just so you know, any one of you can be in here. So I just want to also say just thank you for giving me this platform.
Chris?
3 words: persistence, persistence, persistence.
Yeah, I would just say pray about it. If you're going to tackle it, you're going to need some help. And so,
Well, when I talk to people who are gathering advice for starting a business or a new job, I always start with integrity first. And we haven't touched on that today, but I know all four of the panelists would agree with me that integrity is such an important part of building the trust first within your company and then with your audience. And you know, they say character is who you are and what you do when no one is looking, and that has to be there for a successful business.
Thank you. That wraps our first Power Breakfast of the year, and thank you again for coming again. I'm Chris Kineski, publisher for the Business Record. If I can ever be of any help to you, again, our best story ideas, the best way that we can help you is to understand what you need. So feel free to reach out my way. I'd be happy to meet with you. Thank you again to our sponsors, and can I get a big round of applause for our